and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
Jared.
And I'm Chris.
And this is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. Today, we are starting our discussion of a memory called Empire and a short story called Vaster Than Empire, but More Slow. Is that right? By Ursula Le Guin. I'm totally winging it, as you can probably tell. We're discussing the first 4
Nothing
chapters.
new there.
Exactly. Don't need to tell you know. A memory called Empire. We're discussing chapters 1 through 4, and then we'll be continuing on with the next 100-ish pages. I don't have the thing open in front of me. I should have had it. Next week we will be reading, I pulled it up right there, chapters 5 through 9. that brings us up to page 195. Yes, pros make other people wait. Good News from the Vatican by Robert Silverberg is our short story for next week, another author that I'm excited to read. And it's interesting. The short story had a line that could have been what the title of the second book in our current duology came from. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Yes. It was something about how this was this desolation. This peace was not desolation. And the next book in this duology is called A Desolation Called Peace.
This is called Peace.
Mm-hmm. So, which I think is a very poetic name, by the way.
It is.
Yeah. Same with A Memory Called Empire. What are we thinking? High-level thoughts?
High-level book.
Nice.
Oh, what a pro. You've been sitting on that one all week, Jared.
Yeah.
I swear, totally off the cuff. I swear.
Well played.
Well, I like the simplicity contrasted with the complexity of this story. Because the story is like right from the back matter on my copy. I don't know about you guys, but it's just Ambassador Mahit, I don't know how you say that, is far from home. Her predecessor has been murdered. Her one connection to home has gone silent. That's pretty much the basic setup here, and it's a pretty basic setup. But the presentation and the execution of the setup in this story, I think, is fantastic. I loved it, and I just love. I wanted to keep going, but I couldn't because the boss told me no. But I love the main character. I love her interactions with the people on this world. I love her situation. I think it's extremely interesting, and I love the little pieces of politics we get without being overwhelmed with a new world. And I love the little pieces of information we get about this space opera setting that really just, it's the tip of the iceberg, but it's quite enough to be so enjoyable, and that's what I liked about it.
Yeah, I like all of those thoughts, Jared. That's absolutely correct. It is on one hand extremely dense politically and science fiction. I think there is, as you say, quite a lot going on to that thing. But I think at its heart, it's about intrigue and political mystery. Which I think ties it very much into something that we can talk about, because it is essentially about two cultures, may as well be two countries, where there has been a political assassination. And at the start of the book, we know that the people that have been murdered, or the people that are being looked at as the outsiders, have got kind of more skin in the game, or at least more up their sleeve than the indigenous people know about, with this kind of idea that you can have somebody else's memories basically implanted into your own and being passed forward. And that in its own right just sets up a kind of a political or chess game in some ways I speak. Now, I was surprised actually how quickly that gets resolved, at least on a surface level, with a couple of the characters that came out. And I loved the scene about how that played out, tell me a truth about yourself and all of that kind of stuff, and how much they were willing to speak about to each other quite evenly there, because it sets up a kind of, maybe in terms of like film, in terms like a buddy cop almost, like you've got this small group of people, one from each side or two from each side, that sort of are the inner circle, and everybody else on the outside doesn't know that yet, or we think that, and it sort of creates an ownership from us, the reader, with that little group and our attachment to that group, especially because they all seem to be sort of telling the truth. Although I think we as the reader expect that actually they're not telling us the whole truth either. None of them are telling us the truth, which makes it interesting. So, on one hand, completely complex, loads of science fiction ideas, loads to dive into, but a lot of stuff that's actually very recognizable as well, that is pulling you through an awful lot of that stuff, and so that you kind of get this feeling of, like, I don't totally get all of the science fiction-y stuff yet, but I'm in the game here so far because everything else is so interesting about it, and I sort of have faith that it will, be dished out a little bit as we go along over the course of 2 books, not just one.
Yep, that's a great analysis to start us off. So I'll speak a little bit about the slightly different things, I guess. I think I agree with pretty much all you guys said, but I love the elements that are introduced, the science fiction-y elements, so to speak, especially with the what were they called, the imago, and the questions
Mhm.
that they raise around identity and memory, and immediately the title sort of starts to hit home with the aspects of memory that are that I think will build into the story with the imago. And I love the intrigue around, the Empire doesn't really know that they have these things, but they are ever so slightly similar to, their concept of a successor, right? The Teixcalan Empire's successors, that's and like when who's our protagonist, Mahit, tells I don't remember her liaison's name, but she tells her, it's like, when we go see the successor and see the person we will become. She means it literally, but the Teixcalan also have a
Mm.
successor because they they presumably have this process going. And then of course there's all this technology with the I forget the name of the thing they have in front of their eyes that hooks them up into the cloud constantly, and the fact that they need those even to open doors, the levels of technology they have. I think it's all set up brilliantly, and yes, I also wanted to keep going, so I might do that when we finish our discussion. Good thing I only finished yesterday, so I can continue immediately.
Yeah. 3 seagrass.
Oh,
Three
that's right. And
seagrass,
and
indeed.
I love, that reminds me, I love the naming system for for the Teixcalan Islam. Wait, how did how do you say the name of the Teixcalanism?
I
Never mind.
struggled with that
Yeah.
every time. Even though it's the name of the series, the TX Kalani. Every time that I came to it, I kind of tried to get to a point where it kind of started to trip off the tongue a little bit. Like it was very nonchalant, but I could never quite get there. I got it actually with Mahit. Mahit has a peculiar second name. I have it as Dismari, right? Which I think is very stylish, and it's probably not the way it was meant to be, but at least it sort of tripped off the tongue. But it just meant that every time I got to that damn TX Kalani, I was like, no, it doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Her
Yeah,
last name, like, kudos for saying that. I'm just a zzz
yeah.
and move on. Sorry, Jared.
Yeah, I was just in my head. It would just be Texies.
Lol.
So it came up a lot. I mean, there's a lot of words made up in here that you'll have to get used to as you first get into the book. But once you do, it just flies. It flies by.
Yeah. And the dedication of the book is made out to anyone else who has fallen in love with a culture not their own or something like that. And I think that's really relevant in a world where, like the post-colonial time, where like, there's this makes me think of, suppose, I guess, there's certain parts where, and I think I grew up with this sort of feeling that there's some sophistication about speaking English well, or speaking English with a certain way, and being good at it, and loving things of that language, and so on. So there's a certain relatability to what our protagonist is dealing with, I think, which, yeah, I think is really well done so far. Like finding her need to get out of her, not get out of, but to be part of this culture that she loves, while also retaining her identity and where she's from, and trying to protect that. I think yeah, I hope that builds well through the rest of the series, but I love the way it started so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the identity thing's a big theme in here, especially since we find out right away that her was it imago? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Her situation with her imago isn't normal, so we find that out like very quickly, that something's a little, she tells us something's a little different, and so that just brings up all these questions of identity, and what she has as memories from her predecessor, or the download of her predecessor into her brain. And I love how the little descriptions of, he's affecting her nervous system a little bit, and she's doing involuntary movements and stuff like that, from movements that he would have done, that she wasn't wasn't normal for her. And and the biggest thing that threw me for a loop, which was a pleasant surprise, was all of a sudden he's gone. I was like, I thought we were going to be getting this dialogue throughout the whole book here, the whole sections, but boom, he's gone. And that scene where they visit the dead body, that was spectacular.
Yeah.
When you visit his dead body, that just spoke volumes about identity, and what it means, and how it works, and stuff like that, and how it freaked out a downloaded memory in her. And I was just like, wow, that's deep.
So that scene works on so many levels, because obviously we read it as the seeing of your own dead body causes a trauma, even though he's dead in an implanted memory. But I also think, this is my first wild stab here, that that's a complete misnomer. I think that's convenient for us as the reader to think that that's what happened, but I'm not entirely sure that is what happened in that case, for it to disappear. Because to me, there were a couple of opportunities afterwards where you would have expected the second consciousness to come back to the fore. There were a couple of opportunities that they could have re-engaged at that point, and they didn't. And they keep on referring to this idea that the second consciousness didn't get time to embed and learn properly. You get the scene just before that where they both do this thing at the same time, and they drop the thing out of their hands, which they thought, oh God, that's not right. We're not in sync. We're not working together. And you kind of get these little crumbs before that of like, okay, this relationship, while it's established in their customs or otherwise as being a way to work, it obviously hasn't worked correctly. And then we have the scene of the retraction of one of the consciousness, which works really well narratively as well, because I think if we had known that person had been there, we'd have maybe learned a bit too much, or we would expected to learn a bit more than we need to, and so it creates this kind of obfuscation for us as the reader to kind of dig through them.
Because it could have easily fallen into they're just the narrators of the story between the both of them. And yet now there's another mystery because he's gone. And I just thought it was great how she wrote that. And the I just the part that when he's looking on the body again, and he says to her, "I got old." I thought that said so much.
Yeah.
I was just like, wow. Just imagine that. I was just like, that just really got me. I was just like, imagine that. Imagine your 30-year-old self, and you're looking on your 50-year-old dead body. Like that's crazy.
That's hard enough when you're looking back at 5 years of memories. Like, you
Yeah.
just go, God, look at me. I wasted those years.
Yeah. Yeah. And she wonders. She wonders what his continuation would have thought about this. She speaks of his continuation as something beyond the experience that has or is ever going to have, and
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot to unpack there.
It brings up a lot of the existential questions that cloning does, I suppose. And yeah, I guess that's true of any memory download. But are we the same person now that you're blending together? How much of your identity do you retain? And I think the most fascinating thing of it all to me is how willing she is to have her personality sort of absorbed into that of her imago. And I suppose she said it's only a small percentage of the population that has this, right? But even for them, to me, it feels like quite a sacrifice to be sort of taking on this cloak around your personality. But she's okay with it, and that I think is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, is it a sacrifice or is it an honor?
Yeah, that too. Yes. Yeah.
Well,
Because
it also speaks. Sorry, go ahead, Farsa.
No, go ahead. I don't think I had too much to add to that.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that it also speaks to a need. So, in the relationships between these two cultures, there's obviously a distrust there that necessitated this technology or something, which we don't know a great deal about, other than the explosions, the bombs, and the things that seem to be happening around the same time as this new ambassador's kind of coming through. So there's obviously a past here, and again, not to go over kind of old ground a little bit, but if the old ambassador had been in her head, there wouldn't been as much mystery for us to read and to get through. So we kind of can go into it kind of with a sense of wonder rather than anything else, and we can use that later on down the line of that other persona or the other narrative to fill in once we know the background. So it's a very clever narrative device, I think, in a lot of ways, because it creates this mystery and this distrust and this kind of idea that nobody even really knows what's going on. It doesn't seem to me that Three Seagrass really knows what's going on to a certain point. The other politician that they're going to meet seems to know a bit more than they're letting on. They seem to hold a bit of the keys, which is why, we as the reader are like, come on, get these people together. We need to have that conversation to find out what's going on here. But yeah, there's way more, and I suspect this will continue into the second book. There's way more happening here than we ever understand.
Yeah, sure. Especially since well, we kind of got thrown a red herring. We thought we were gonna find out stuff when she met his old contact, and then all
That's
of a
right.
sudden, politics comes into play, and he gets blown up, and so that but that was another aspect of the story that was fascinating, was the politics. It wasn't only just a simple murder mystery from her predecessor. It was there's other things coming into play on a political level that, I mean, yeah, it could have been a political murder, but it most likely was, but it could have stopped there as far as storytelling went, and they just tried to figure out the murder. But no, now they're adding in terrorists basically, and they're adding in she's adding in another level to her situation, and I really like that.
There's also the intrigue of potentially another vaster empire, right? Maybe with the prologue when they
Oh yes.
I forget his name again. It's just too many vowels together. And that's my excuse this time. When I forget easier names to remember, you can come yell at me then. But
It's a vowel
the
problem.
the when he talks about how some spaceships went missing in a certain area of space, and he thinks that that could be indicative of an empire that's vaster than Teixcalan, and he's hoping for that even because he wants a third alternative where he doesn't have to be subsumed or I don't know what the other what his second option was to sort of become irrelevant, I suppose, because they are on the fringes of empire. But the third option has to do with the second empire. And I wonder if a memory called empire, it sounds like the lostness of an empire, if that's what we'll start to get to with that. I think of all, like, the murder mystery is great, and I think that that's a really good hook for a science fiction novel. And I think I'm starting to appreciate that more because I didn't used to. There was some book, science fiction book, that I refused to read because murder mystery, vampires in space, who cares? But I think I'm starting to because they provide good hooks to explore the sci-fi ness of a world. So that's great. I think that's really good. But I think the biggest mystery for me right this moment is what's going on in that area of space, because like it's just a slight unobtrusive reference to it in the prologue. But anything that's done in the prologue like that, if it's done well, will start to play a big part later in the story.
Yeah. If it, I mentioned this kind of during the week when we were speaking about the kind of preliminary thoughts of this. It is extremely thematically similar to Embassy Town by Jenny Bayville to me. This dual consciousness, this to society kind of mystery thing that almost like it's a strategic alliance of that kind of stuff, and this misunderstanding of one versus another one. Even the naming convention of the number and the object kind of is like they are called, and the miscommunication and mistrust and all of that kind of stuff that's going on. It's so reminiscent thematically of it that you wonder if one inspired the other one, although they were both roughly around the same time, so almost certainly likely not in some ways, but it's hard not to draw parallels between it, although I actually don't get the sense that they're going to resolve it anyway similarly at all, because I think the whole point of Embassy Town was about the language. It was a book about language and about communication, and this one I feel it's more about what's going on kind of on a macro level, in this universe, a bit like you were just saying there, Varsha, about the empire or the hidden empire or whatever it is at the time, and people knowing more than they want to let on, or they're trying to protect in some way. So but it definitely, like, within 20 pages I was like, oh my god, this could have been the setup to Embassy Town in a lot of ways.
Yeah, even with the female protagonist, although I think I never really got attached to her in Embassy Town, but I feel like I already really like Mahit. So yeah, apart from that, I think I agree. I was thinking about Embassy Town just because of the language connection, but you're right, there's so much more that they share, that they have in common. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd be curious to see how they diverge from here. There is a murder mystery. I think that's going to take up a big part of it.
Absolutely, yeah. What happened?
Maybe. I mean, we definitely have the a faction who took out this predecessor's contact. So the mystery may not be who killed him, but how and why he got killed rather than who, because I have a feeling we're going to get some answers pretty soon to some of the political situation and what's actually going on with whoever is. Not everyone in the city loves the city. That was one of the lines.
That's right. Yeah,
came from, yeah, and not everyone in the world loves the world, and so on and so forth. And so that it's going to be interesting to find out what that entails. Because if she meets with the emperor or other high up people, I'm quite sure that they're going to have a theory as to who the troublemakers are, and more than likely, we're also going to delve into the troublemakers themselves and see, unless this is going to be completely one-sided, I have a feeling that we'll eventually get to, the other side viewpoint and see what the problem with the empire is and why everybody doesn't love this city that they're in. Looking
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? Like, she's so I guess what's the word I'm looking for? She's all starry-eyed about the empire. She desperately wants to live there, and she really wanted this job. It's not for her. It's not about, like, she had to lose a friendship with someone because they wanted the job more as much as she did, and so on. So this really means a lot to her. So the looking at it from a distance versus coming closer and seeing all the holes in it aspect of it, I think that also is another thing that's off to a great start. It's set up really well. um yeah, and also I love the existential aspect of the city. The word for city, world, and even empire, I think,
Oh,
is
that's right.
all
Yeah.
the same in the Tixkalani language. And so, and so when Three Seagrass asked her a question, it's like it was just, what are you doing here in this place, and not an existential question about life. But, but I love that. And the fact that they're so literary, they speak in poems about buildings. It's, yeah,
And the speaking
it's a good
metaphor.
setup.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. The not everybody loves the city kind of gives off vibes of being an underclass within this society, so to speak. Again, very reminiscent of a lot of books that we've read before. Kind of any good excuse to talk about Cordwainer Smith I'll take, but it kind of gives me ideas of this idea, because most of the time so far we've sort of met what seems to be the aristocracy of the Tixkalani that is in there. We sort of think that's representative of the people, but obviously the aristocracy, by their very nature, are just a very small section of any society and any kind of privileged class, so to speak. It'll be interesting to see how that all comes about after, when we get to investigate the explosion.
Yeah, and the fact that the previous guy was predecessor. I have to stop saying 4 words when
The,
I mean
the
one.
guy, the last guy before the last one, right?
Correct.
No.
Exactly. So, oh my god, the predecessor. How do you say it?
Predecessor. Yeah.
Predecessor. He was, like, really chummy with the emperor, and one of his concubines is really friendly with him. and probably knows about the imago business. So there's a lot of intrigue being set up. I'm particularly curious about that concubine character too.
Yeah.
What
One,
else?
I was going to say, one other thing that I really liked, this might have just been
Yes.
me, when they were talking about the naming convention, they were basically saying that everybody has a
Yeah.
number. And they were
Yes.
sort of having a go at people who didn't have numbers between 1 and 10, as if they were a bit hipster or something. They were like,
Yeah.
something. I thought that was really funny.
Oh yeah, the 36 all-terrain tundra. I love that. I I burst out laughing, and then I had to stop and explain the joke to my husband. Oh man.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Oh man. Well,
Yes,
at least she
36
didn't stop
all-terrain
and think
tundra.
about how her uncle taught her about space bears.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but also the 2E epsilon, no, sorry, 2E asteroid. that that was brilliant. The kid in her class who named himself 2E asteroid. No, no.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who found that amusing?
No, that was fun. I like that.
Yes. Um Yeah. So, sorry, you were saying something, Jared. I think I may have cut you off accidentally. No? Okay.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Then anything else before we go on to the short story, which
No,
also has themes of empire, maybe.
that's true. No, we should just finish the book for next week. I think that should be.
Yeah, I think I don't mind. Let's do that.
No, it's very, very fun read so far, and definitely an enormous step up thematically and in sci-fi terms from a previous read.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
just say.
And
Absolutely.
I think we can safely say we don't just like it because of the Reamdy hangover. We actually like it. At least I do.
Well,
No?
I think the contrast doesn't hurt it. I think
Yeah.
that's for sure. When you're starting off a new book and you're kind of often many of us mood read and you kind of finish off a book and you're trying to think what to come next off the shelf, that you kind of think to yourself, God, I hope it gives me a good contrast from what beforehand. And this definitely fulfills that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't ever have to think that because I'm always told what to read next. So
That's
it's all
true.
good.
That's true. You've gotten into that business yourself a little bit with the short fiction side hustle.
I did, yes. This did win the Hugo Award for
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
2020.
Yeah.
And
As
I
did
got a
the
little.
sequel.
Oh, did it? Oh, wow, cool.
Mm.
Oh,
There was a
really?
little.
Interesting.
There was a little tag in my library copy that told me that. I was like, oh, cool.
Nice.
Ah, very nice.
I thought it was only Jamison who had Hugo Awards for every book in a series. But, I mean, she got more because she had a trilogy, but this one
Yes, yeah.
counts,
Okay, Jameson.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
Very cool. Now, the Ursula Le Guin short story, vaster than
Yeah.
Empire and more slow. And because it's so slow, I did not read the last 5 pages of the short story.
It was a long story. It was a long story. I'm
Mhm.
going to try and sum it up
Yes.
as best as I can. A group of misfits put together an escape on a ship called Gum. Bagum! To explore planets and arrive in a world which I believe is World 4470, thankfully, according to Jared's subtitle name here. And they arrive on a place that seems to have only vegetation and life there. And the misfit group battle each other as well as the planet itself to kind of discover what is going on here, to rather interesting results. I think it's fair to say. I think that's roughly what it's about. There's some more stuff going on about where their origins came from. Kind of there's discussion about autism, about different character flaws and traits, and about sentience within the story. But yeah, that seems to be roughly what it was about to me, anyway.
Yeah, that about sums it up, at least as far as I got. So did it translate to sapient plants? Is that what it was? What attacked Osden?
Sentient plants. So
Sentient plants.
yeah, so the whole thing was based around at the end that there was an interconnected world. Basically, the entire world was one consciousness, one overall consciousness, and it was all connected by the tree root system and all of that kind of stuff. And the end is that our main character that we follow, the autistic person formerly known as Osgun or Ogden or whatever he's called.
Yeah.
Yeah, he basically wanted to become one with the planet and basically left everybody to become one with the planet, and yeah, that was pretty
I
much it.
love
Enjoying
that
his
ending for
consciousness.
him.
Mr.
He couldn't be
Austin,
happy
Yeah.
around the others, and they couldn't be happy
Yeah.
around him. So that seems like a good way for.
Well, that was pretty much exactly the end of the story, Varsha, in some ways, because I have to admit that I found his characterization, especially using autism as the kind of breakdown, as not being as almost like they fixed him and made him the opposite of what he was beforehand, sort of problematic. I have to say, I thought that was I was ham-fisted and probably very much of its time, but it just felt a bit unnecessary, if that makes sense. But I think the characterization of him as a person made him the most interesting character, obviously, to follow, because everybody else just seemed to be kind of paranoid, and they all had their own flaws and faults, but they didn't really get investigated to the same level as they did with him. So that he kind of got to make that choice for himself at the end was interesting. I think actually created a satisfying end of that story that I didn't know where it was going. Maybe about 2/3 of the way through, I was like, what's really happening here? I don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
yeah.
you're right
I agree about. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jared.
about the ham-fisted thing. That you hit the nail on the head there. The whole autism would be preferable, and I was just like, yeah, okay, it's a little troublesome there, but it pulled through in the end, like you said, and I really did like the ending and how it turned out.
Yeah, that stuff made me vaguely cringe because it felt like someone's understanding of what this is like, which I think even for its time, I feel like there was a certain period, and maybe even now it's true of some groups of people sort of like grouping and saying that this is true of everyone like this, and that's always problematic. Sorry, Chris, what were you saying?
No, I wasn't really good. I was just mainly just agreeing with you, and I felt it wasn't even as if it was just the understanding of the time. It was the way it committed to it. I think was really the problem, as an absolute, and also making him a very bitter and detached character, an angry character. I think that those two things coupled together made it difficult to read. Is probably putting it lightly, but it just made it. I couldn't really take the story seriously and the consequences and the actions for that first half of the story because of his characterization. It made it difficult to attach myself to that character, and it was only when he was the subject of the attack, so to speak, within the story that it kind of coalesced around him then, and it became less about his background and his autism and his anger and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it became a more fleshed out person that it really started to gain traction for me.
Yeah, I felt the empathic connections that he had was a pretty cool story vehicle in that part of it. Like when the way he had to deal with everybody's emotions slamming into him all the time, and their feelings slamming into him all the time. That would be enough to drive somebody nuts. And I thought that part of it was cool, because that's a lot to flesh out there. And then, of course, it ended up being the vehicle, which ended up being his, kind of his salvation, really, when he joined with the planet.
Absolutely.
And so that was pretty interesting. And I like there's a great line in the beginning of the story that's called the humans were like apprehensive spermatozoa trying to fertilize the universe. And I thought that was an interesting take on humanity's spread throughout the universe. And the contrast, the irony is that it was basically they went to this fertile world that was so fertile it was one conscious, and he actually became a part of that rather than humanity becoming a part of it. And so it was it was pretty good. It was well put together in that sense.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was also a really interesting discussion about fear and about primal fear and about especially stepping into the unknown. I think because they had this discussion about that they are busy on this planet alone with just vegetative plants and all of that kind of stuff. But when it actually transpired what had happened, like he was face down and then he was turned around, and the person that was turning him around, I can't remember their name, they felt fear of him, and they attributed that maybe he was fearful of themselves and that somebody within the group was at fault for the attack or responsible for the attack. And then it turned out that his fear was just his again hyper empathy with the planet, the idea that they were all one and they sensed the fact that they were all individuals, and that was what they were afraid of. I thought that was a very clever thing to build around the conclusion of the story around, because it did give it real wheels at that stage, and give it kind of meaning for what was going on. Like, if you kind of think of that in reverse, if they were by themselves and there were so much around them that was the same and that was a threat, then you would have felt kind of an overwhelming urge to kind of run away at that stage in much the same way. So I thought that was interesting. And it also raised the kind of the question in my head, which is totally unrelated, of course, as well, is that for anybody that's vegan, if you found out the plants were sentient, what the fuck would you do?
It's a difficult question.
It is.
But
Yeah.
I guess the question is, do they feel pain? That's a starting point. But they feel fear, so they must feel pain in some form.
Yeah. But I suppose, I mean, again, bigger, this is what good sci-fi writing does. I suppose it kind of starts and percolates these ideas in your head, and then you think, right, well, if it's all right being a human that lives for 60, 70, 80, 90 years, or whatever it is, but if you were a tree with no expiry date, then how do you perceive time and life in that way? Does it change and all of that kind of stuff? So there are things to kind of ponder over there.
Yeah. That's a really cool reveal. I kind of wish I had made the time to read ahead, but go on, Jared. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's what one of the lines in here that Austin says is that that's it, isolated. That's the fear. It's not that we're mortal destructive. It's just that we are other. There's never been an other for this planet, for this biome. And so they realize that they are the other. And I like that. Those concepts, those sci-fi concepts of the other is always something that people play with, but I like how that was twisted around in this case.
Yep. I had a question. I didn't get to the end, so I couldn't make anything of the title. So I was curious what that was referring to. The scale of the planet, was it referenced directly in the story at all, or is it an allusion to the nature of the plant consciousness?
I'm not sure, but I know the answer to that. There's an awful, like with an awful lot of these short stories, there's an awful lot set up at the start, and I'm sort of not engaged in the story at that stage. So I think there was some more stuff about why they were doing their moving and stuff around. It was just the pulling together of the fact that this intertwined root system then became the entire consciousness, and it was sort of developed over a couple of pages of that what was going on.
I wonder if that speaks. I'm curious about this comparison. If it is about that plant consciousness, which I suppose it ought to be, and sort of equating it to the nature of empire, if there is some commentary there on the sameness of individuals who become part of an empire, which is kind of what the humans are fighting to separate themselves from, right? They want to, like parents who are too annoyingly understanding or whatever. The Hainish just told them, yeah, cool, you can go explore if you want, go find other aliens if you like. And so they are wanting to separate themselves. So they want this individuality, and they've come upon this consciousness that's all one unit, which, yeah, that's interesting.
Now, she mentions the Hainish Empire origins. Is that the same empire people from her sci-fi novels like The Dispossessed and?
Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I couldn't remember.
I think
but it did feel familiar.
Yeah, she wrote several novels and short stories in that world, and I think the Hainish are the same. Like, it's called the Hainish cycle.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Right. All right.
I think that's correct.
Interesting.
Yeah, an interesting story. One that I wasn't sure I was going to like. Even about 2/3 of the way through, I was like, I was like, I'm not sure, but it did come around, and something I really enjoyed by the end of it, especially the ideas that were contained within.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
the
to the
ending
point I
made it
had
work.
gotten, I wasn't sure if I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else? Any closing thoughts before we move on?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next episode with the next 5 chapters of A Memory Called Empire and the Robert Silverberg short story from the Big Book of Science Fiction. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.